All right, you were on.
Okay, so let's just do this shit right now. So I had a dream a couple of days ago, right? I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but it was very impactful, right? So I snake dreams, right? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a little while, right? I'd be interested to hear if you've had any snake dreams before and what they constituted, right? But I will go ahead and kind of share just a quick summation from Carl Jung
Okay.
regarding the snake dream. Can you see it?
Yep.
Carl Jung on the serpent. The serpent is the earthly essence of man of which he is not conscious. Its character changes according to peoples and lands, since it is the mystery that flows to him from the nourishing earth mother. The earthly separates forethinking and pleasure in man, but not in itself. It has the weight of the earth in itself, but also its changeability and germination, from which everything that becomes emerges. So obviously, right there, full moon theme for sure. I mean, new moon theme rather,
Yeah.
the germination and the sprouting, right? But there's also the plutonic theme here. So what I want to reference, I had the snake dream, and it was specifically my. I was at the house of my grandmother, right, and my mother was also there.
Hmm.
A series of events happened, right? I was like, why are we here? There were lots of things in the house, right? And I was wandering the house by myself, and I fell to the ground and I was paralyzed. And a serpent came crawling towards me, right? And I woke up. This was a couple of days ago, and it took me a little while to understand and kind of digest the dream as it related to the current astrology. I'm going to tell the story first, and then I'm going to bring it back to the astrology. So we're
Okay.
here with the serpent. We understand that this is the earthly essence of man of which he is not conscious. And so if you think about the archetype of Pluto, it's the Teutonic underground, right? So that's what
Hmm.
Hades controls and Hades rules. If you think of Pluto, it's the soil of the earth through which everything emerges, transforms, and changes, right? The
Hmm.
underworld or hell, right? You have to go down into hell or down into the actual body of the earth in order to come into contact with Pluto or Hades, right? And of course, this is
Right.
the realm. This is the realm of Scorpio. So there's a really important myth in Greek mythology surrounding the snake, right? There's a lot of different myths across the world about heroes killing snakes, right? But this myth, I think, is probably the most, like, just very, very clear cut here. We don't need to get any more than two paragraphs. It doesn't need to be more complicated, right? The serpent or medieval style dragon. You have people like Siegfried in world mythology that killed a snake, right, or that killed a dragon, and that the dragon is something that holds some sort of greater power or greater knowledge in the killing of the dragon.
Yeah.
Python in the Greek mythology, sometimes written as Pytho, presided at the Delphic oracle. This is before the oracle at Delphi was established as a temple of Apollo, right? And this is the crucial part of it. It existed formerly in the cult center for its mother Gaia, or Earth. Pytho being the place name that was substituted for the earlier Chrysa. Greeks considered the site to be the center of the earth, represented by a stone, the omphalos, or navel, which Python guarded. This is an important part, I think. This discusses, right, we're talking about like the second chakra here.
Yeah.
Python becomes the Teutonic enemy later of the Olympian deity Apollo, who slew it and took over Python's former home and oracle. So Python was Gaia's son. Apollo had to eliminate this opponent before establishing his temple at Delphi. This, right, so I want to connect this here and get into a little bit of depth psychology.
Okay.
Apollo, if we understand the archetype of Apollo, Apollo is, right, the sun god, the sun and light. We're talking here about the sun. Venus in Scorpio, I'm going to connect this right here. Scorpio, lowest form, the snake. Middle form, transformational form, the eagle. Final form, the phoenix, rising from the
Oh,
ashes, the
that's
rebirth,
very interesting.
right? Here's from Alan Oken. Scorpio reveals the most important and difficult important tests. It is a sign through which an individual must pass in order to come into these transformational crises, which turn desire into love and personal will into the will to good of the soul. Scorpio path of disciple, sign of the disciple. We eventually learn how to effectuate these necessary transmutations of our lower self. Committed herself to this battle in the present incarnation. The lower self has to be redeemed by the higher. Purpose in the path of Scorpio rising is not just to do the battle. It is through the conflict that the real task of transformation, real task of Scorpio rising takes place. Transformation. Alan Oken. I'm stumbling over my words a little bit because this is really, really big shit. I've not heard people get to the level of the depth that's necessary to really describe this eclipse. And it is
Hmm.
necessary to get into the mythology and depth psychology of this eclipse because, right, I just want to say it clearly here. What this conflict represents is the sun conjunct Venus in Scorpio. Venus in Scorpio, lowest form, the snake. Sun, Apollo, conjunction, going through right now. What we're going through, and I'm gonna share my screen again. I'm just gonna bring it to the astrology. What we are currently going through is the path of fire, or the Via Combusta, which is the last 15 degrees of Libra and the first 15 degrees of Scorpio, where, of course, the South Node is currently residing, and the Sun and Venus are traveling together in the anaretic degree of Libra, about to ingress into Scorpio for this eclipse. This solar eclipse that we're talking about, we'll finally start talking about it in the actual eclipse now, is this eclipse that's occurring on the 25th, right? But the information here, the knowledge and the wisdom is in this story of Apollo slaying Python and establishing the cult at Delphi. So I'm going to read something really quickly here, or establishing the Apollonian temple at Delphi, rather. So what this signifies is a transformation. I'm going to pull up my notes because I just wrote a quick little thing on it. Apollo killing Python is the incarnation of higher values on Earth, i.e., the virtue of morality over the virtue of materialism. Here, the distinguishment is this: the greed and lust for the flesh of the apparent material thing, and the rejoicing in the lust of the material world, is slain by the higher values of the spirit or the soul self, which appreciates the divinity at the level of the cosmic and the cosmological wholeness as in self-realization. If you think about the archetype of the sun is the wholeness, the rays of light that emanate as the source and center of God. You can see here the kind of this, it's interesting, right? The kind of naval symbology through which the rays of light are cast from this center, forming not only the vision of the sun, but everything that can be illuminated, right? The sun is our sight, first and foremost. It's our vision and sight of self. You want to talk about it in esoteric terms, it's not just the image of the personal self, but it's the vision and sight of the self. There are a lot of mystics throughout history who have said what really exists, right, is pure consciousness, and pure consciousness is just the eyes of God. The eyes of God are always witnessing one another, right? And this is what is known as self-consciousness or self-realization. So if we take the archetype of the sun as this Apollonian, going through not only the Via Combusta, but again, Venus being purified in this path through and across the sun, right? As we see over the course of the several days leading up to this eclipse, there's the conjunction as Venus passes over the sun, through the sun, immediately into the new moon solar eclipse point, right? So this here, Venus in its lowest form in Scorpio, right? If we're just taking this at the most general, jealousy, possessiveness, I don't know how to describe it, like sexual enslavement.
Yeah, obsession for sure.
Right, obsession, all of these things that involve the snake form of Scorpio, which is the primal principle or the survival principle of the organism, the realm and the domain of the animal unconscious, or the unconscious organism which operates unconsciously as the nature principle, right? So if we're thinking about Python as the son of Gaia, what we're talking about here is this snake principle as in the animal unconscious. And this is something that, again, I'm going to just pull up the young bit because I think it's really important to analyze the archetype of the snake in relation to Venus and Scorpio and its lower forms. I promise this won't turn into a whole rant. I just want to get this through, right?
You're all good.
The serpent is the earthly essence of man of which he is not conscious. Its character changes according to the people and lands, since its mystery flows to him from the nourishing earth mother. Again, Gaia, Python, son of Gaia. The earthly separates forethinking and pleasure in man, but not in itself. The serpent has the weight of the earth in itself, but is also changeable in the germination from which everything that becomes emerges. Again, there's that Pluto aspect here. Talking about Venus and Scorpio, again, in the house of Pluto, in the sign of Pluto. So what goes on in the slaying of the serpent by Apollo is the enlightening, right? If you think about it, light being cast down onto the soil, what emerges? What emerges from the light being cast down onto the soil? What emerges is consciousness where there formerly was only animal unconsciousness, right? So if you think about the light being cast down onto the soil, which is a crucial part of the germination of the seed, which then sprouts out into the light of day, solar consciousness, that solar consciousness is not only penetrative, but productive in terms of what emerges from the soil. So this is a when we're talking about this solar eclipse here, this is a enlightening of that Python. This is Apollo killing Python and establishing the oracle at Delphi, which is, as you can see literally in the Greek mythology in the course of history, the establishment of really a new form of spirituality and a new form of divinity, which is the cult of the sun god, or the solar focused cult, where formerly what was being worshipped was Python, or the son of the earth mother. And I'm not making an argument here for like, this is much deeper than like some sort of binary of patriarchy and matriarchy, and I hope we're seeing this here. But
Yeah.
what occurs in the hero Apollo slaying Python is a realization of the possibility of higher values, as in solar consciousness penetrating the former ground of the animal unconsciousness. What this signifies here is self-realization at a level where we are being asked to incarnate higher values and virtues and transmute the animal unconscious into something else and something new. You could call it, Dane Rudyard calls it the new man. Che Guevara, I don't know if you've heard of him or familiar with him, also referenced this in his writings. The incarnation of a new man around moral values and virtues as opposed to materialist values and virtues. And we've been seeing this over the course of hundreds and thousands of years, where this process of this slow awakening of human consciousness, or the evolution of consciousness, is occurring. And I think this is a huge moment here that is occurring, of course, over several years and even decades here that we're talking about that's been happening with the events in 2020 astrologically, but as well as the events that are coming up over the next couple of years astrologically that are also going to be pretty landmark in terms of Pluto and Saturn ingressing into new signs. But this here is archetypally bang on for me what this represents. And we're going to see over the course of this eclipse portal what this transformation brings about in terms of the way that we have relationships and the way that we view the world, the way that we value materiality or value our relationships with ourselves and relationships with others, going through the path of Via Combusta and Libra and Scorpio. And this is, again, Python is, and I'm going to show, there's an interesting, I'm almost done here, I swear, because I really want to hear your thoughts, and I want to go back and forth on this. The asteroid Pythia, it's currently at 17 degrees Virgo. I'm not going to go into any aspects that it's making or anything like that, but there's an important kind of continuation of this archetypal story here. Pythia was the name given to the priestesses who served at the oracle at Delphi. They settled at Delphi, so a stone marking the navel of the earth, again, referring back to that mythology of Apollo and Python. Sacred spot became the place of Gaia worship and was guarded by the dragon called Python. The god Apollo slew the dragon, and its rotting flesh was left to purify back into the site. Apollo made his temple there. The female priestesses who worked there were named after this dead python. They were the Pythia. They were the oracles at Delphi. The inner sanctum of Delphi centered around this cleft in the earth, believed again to be the center of the earth, right, the navel, which emitted a gas from the remains of Python. The aroma put the Pythia into a trance, and it was believed that this altered state inspired their prophecies. These women were mainly maidens or crones, those who were childless, Pythia and Virgo. So it's just a doubling down on that archetype here that we're seeing right now. The ones who were married had to give up their married life to make the prophecies this and that, right? So it was believed that they were hallucinating on the gas of this dead and putrefying dragon, again, right, slain by Apollo, to receive visions of the higher world and the visions of spirit. Again, this as above, so below theme. But the Pythia are these mediators, right? And so obviously the kings and the rulers of Greece would come to the Pythia and ask them for divination, right? And so to bring this full circle, I mean, what are we doing right now? What are we attempting to do, right? We're attempting to use these bodies of flesh, right? Transform our consciousness, and through this transformation of consciousness, receive noumenal information, right? When I'm saying noumenal information, I mean messages from spirit, right? In order to understand the way to bring about higher values and transform our consciousness, and not only be animals and not only be people, but to achieve a certain state of being that might be a little more transformational, right? Again, if we're thinking about the snake, the eagle, and the phoenix. This is the last piece here, and then I want to talk about this, and I really want to hear your thoughts. I'm pulling up this last article. It took me a little while to understand and piece all of this together here.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of Nietzsche's Übermensch, right? I think this is a pretty popular conception that people know in the common knowledge as of now. But what the main principle of Nietzsche's Übermensch is the self-overcoming. There's been a lot of misinterpretation in this in philosophical and pop culture circles because people have not actually read Nietzsche and they don't have the necessary philosophical background to understand. Like this, the hero's quest for wholeness. It returns, what finally comes home to me is my own self, and what of myself has long been in strange lands and scattered among all things and incidents. The principle of the Übermensch is directly related to what is occurring here in this myth of Python and Apollo. What it represents, again, just to cement this one last time, is a self-overcoming in the sense that Apollo, or solar consciousness, goes down into the Chthonic underground, goes down into the underground of hell or Hades, goes down into the center of the earth, where the great beast or the dragon or the snake, the son of the earth itself, Python, or I don't know, again, how we're referring to it is the animal unconsciousness, and slays the animal unconsciousness. The solar consciousness slays the animal unconsciousness and thus becomes whole, or the being of light, right? So it's going down into those deepest and darkest places, going down into those deepest and darkest elements and cracks and crevices of who we believe we are, what we believe to be true. Again, this journey of Scorpio Venus through Scorpio. Not only that, but obviously this eclipse season that we're having in Scorpio here, and the ruler Pluto. This journey of transformation of that very animal unconsciousness into solar consciousness.
That's interesting. It actually, everything that you're saying actually ties into some of the things that I picked up. Let me read you the notes that I wrote really quick.
Do it. Nice. Yes.
On this when I was out, by the ocean, and like when I got home, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and he was mentioning something along the lines of how there are some ancient cultures that did not consider the sun to be like the center of our universe. They actually considered it to be Saturn. And we were kind of talking about how that like affects quote unquote the zodiac today and how it's like divided up. So the thoughts that I ended up having after that is, what if the original North Star was actually Saturn?
Just wait, so
for a second.
Okay, so you're talking about in terms of the North Star, it was like this was the vision that was guiding humanity forward.
Yeah. So like it says that like the thought process I was having anyways, that there's a primary culture for quote unquote each age, because and I don't know if this is just like a metaphysical thing and it's pretty recent. I mean, I feel like this whole idea or concept of the age of Aquarius has been around at least since the 70s. But what I was thinking, like if you were to actually divide that up, then there would be a single major culture that dominated each age, right? So like the Egyptians would be the age of Leo, the Babylonians would be the age of Taurus. The oldest culture that we know spoken of is Atlantis and Lemuria. And I think there's one other one, but I can never remember the name of it. So like if every culture rules an age or even a few, and the advancement of these cultures as an indication of the age, it would easily be that the age of Aquarius, quote unquote, if this is the case, then the demarcation of the beginning and end, or the alpha omega of the zodiac, is not actually Pisces Aries. So how that translates to me into what you're talking about, Venus going within the depths, like it's almost kind of that story of Persephone and Demeter. It's like Venus is coming out of the underground right now, like re-emerging back into a quote unquote spring, if you will. And so as far as how that all like really ties together, I'm not sure, but you mentioning this aspect of the Delphi and the Python and just like looking back into some of these older cultures and the things that they used to worship and look at, like for example the Babylonians, I want to say it was Tiamat. I think it was Tiamat, and she was actually shown as like a dragon, if I'm not mistaken, her physical form, or
Yes,
the original
yes,
physical form.
yes. I think what you were talking about, what you just brought up with the astrological ages, is so important to this conversation, right? Because I don't know. Again, I'll just bring up Carl Jung, right? One of his big books and one of his big topics ended up becoming the Age of Pisces, and right, the Age of Pisces being marked formally by obviously the incarnation of Jesus Christ, right? And what that transformation of Christ consciousness means and meant in terms of the incarnation of the God body into a human form, and the idea that we actually contain the gods within ourselves, and the power of the solar light of consciousness within ourselves, right? Or it is ourselves, right? So here you go. She is the symbol of the chaos of primordial creation. And that is exactly what we're talking about here. That's exactly what we're talking about with this theme of Python. Python actually, right? If you look at it cross-culturally, there's no difference. There is
Yeah.
absolutely zero, no difference here. What we're talking about is the chaos of primordial creation. It's not only the earth mother, right, but the animal unconsciousness, or the very agent that moves the animal unconsciousness, right? It's something that's much more deep, much deeper and archetypal than just this idea of the earth mother. It's like the cosmic mother, right? And I think again you could refer to the chaos of primordial creation, and there are many goddesses across the world, right, that were worshipped during this period of time, and periods of time where it's not to say this way or that, but humanity was in a very different state of consciousness. And what I would argue is, right, we have a lot of these hero myths that emerged,
Yeah.
right, in terms of Siegfried or in terms of Apollo, right, who slay this dragon. And we could debate all day whether or not it's like was necessary, or whether it's a bad thing or a good thing. But what it represents is an evolution of human consciousness, where this archetype of Python, right, or the archetype of the chaos of primordial creation is being slain by, again, the solar consciousness, and which is conceived of, I think, in a kind of twisted and stupid way by a lot of people as like the patriarchy or whatever, and people will
Right.
conceive of the primordial chaos of creation as the matriarchy, and it's just such a bad way to look at it, and it's really not a
Too
disciplined way
binary.
of, yeah, it's not a disciplined way of thinking about this evolution of consciousness. What we're being called toward, right, is a wholeness of being, right? It's not masculine or feminine, it's not left or right, it's not A or B. It's a wholeness of consciousness, which necessarily, right, in the penetration down into the chaos of primordial creation, which is a lot of the tantrics or mystics would actually refer to this as the ground of everything, right? Pluto is actually the ground of all creation itself. In the penetration down into that, by solar consciousness, there is a unification or an understanding. And the solar consciousness, again, in this movement with Venus and the sun during this eclipse, right? And we have to look at the eclipse period, and we definitely have to talk a little more about what eclipses represent in particular, because if this was just a transit that was happening, right, we'd probably talk about the Inanna myth, right, and we talk about the going down into the underworld. But the eclipse to me represents a significant, it's like a shutter, right?
Yeah.
Something flickers, like the lights go out and the lights go back on. That the lights are going out and going back on with this configuration, to me, represents again a quantum experience of
Yeah.
this, which is something that goes down into what you're talking about here, the astrological ages of consciousness.
It's interesting too, like very shortly after like I had this, thought passing through my head kind of about this, I actually saw a heptagram on the back of someone's car, which, I see a lot of the, random symbols or whatnot in on people's cars, and it just, my state's kind of, we have a lot of people here who like that stuff. Let me just put it that way. But I've never
Yeah.
seen a heptagram. So like I looked it up, and it's like it was one of the first representations of the ancient planets. So that's what we consider our personal planets. So Sun through Saturn, including the moon, right?
Right.
And I kept thinking about what you said last time about this idea of acts of nobility and the experience that I had while I was out there, how diplomacy is something that came up really heavily about the ability to foster diplomacy in situations where you either may not think that it's called for or that might actually be difficult to achieve, but still managing to do that and not falling within that concept of acts of nobility. So that was something else that I found really interesting. I'm still looking into the heptagram to figure out where that all falls within this. I mean, I don't know. In the charts, are we looking at major aspects to all of those ancient planets?
Well, I'm hearing you, right? And I just want to go with this. What that represents to me, right, is again this process of the astrological ages. If I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to shut down half of this chart, what I would do is shut down transformation, love. Yeah, I don't think they had Chiron, right? I mean,
Mm-mm. Well,
this
they had him in
idea,
myth. They had him in myth, but I don't know that Chiron necessarily came into the party.
right? Of course,
Astrology,
right?
right?
We would shut down Uranus, right? We would shut down this idea of quantum consciousness or quantum knowledge, or this idea of the spirit suddenly coming down into the body, the epiphany moment, right? Ben Franklin with the key being struck by lightning, right? We would lose these transpersonal planets, and I
Yeah,
think that's a really crucial thing that we're talking about right now, because what the transpersonal planets signify, I think, at the most fundamental level, is it's not all about me.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So there's this theme here again with the slaying of the serpent or the slaying of Python, the animal unconscious. What that signifies at its first and foremost to me is just the survival of the organism,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the survival of the organism, and I think we've lived in that state for thousands of years as
Yeah,
humanity, right? Where it's like it's I have to survive. What am I doing to survive? How can I survive? Right. And I don't think we're necessarily out of that, right? But what I think the paradigm shift and what is being called for in this time is Apollo slaying Python, right?
mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying like matriarchy or patriarchy or whatever. What we need is a unity of the two, in that the Python has to exist, Apollo has to slay Python, but then what comes after that?
Right.
What is the next myth, right? Because what we have now is these transpersonal planets, which are telling us very clearly, not only are we not alone, not only are we not the only ones that matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is this call, again, if we want to talk about the Aquarian age, to a real sense of global community. And we're
Right.
talking about the astrological ages. We're talking about Babylon. We're talking about Egypt. We're talking about all of these different cultures and societies. But what would it mean to have a truly global civilization? And what would
Mm-hmm.
that actually entail, right? And the discovery of Pluto, right? No mistake that it occurs during World War II. The discovery of Pluto is a crucial step forward in that evolutionary process. World War II, right? I mean, there's no skirting around it. It's the confrontation on the global stage, right? World War I, World War II. These
Yeah.
global stage events where for the first time maybe in human history, we realize not only are we a global planet, but there's the possibility of like really truly global war, right? Um, that to me is what these transpersonal planets signify. And if we're talking about eclipses in the sign of Pluto, we're talking about, sure, the ancient ruler Mars. I have no problem with, right, talking about Mars as one of the co-rulers of
Mm-hmm.
Scorpio, but I am absolutely, I could never practice ancient astrology or Hellenistic astrology, because what it would entail is me disavowing Pluto as the ruler of Scorpio. Not only that, but disavowing the importance and the primacy of Pluto as the principle of the transformation of the soul in the astrological chart.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make sense to cut out those planets. Their energy is obvious, especially on a collective level. How it manifests in your life as a on a personal level, I think, clearly that's going to depend on your chart and where you are, but those energies are present. So it doesn't make sense to ignore them.
Your comment on the astrological ages, I think, is really important, because what we're looking at here since 2020, really, I'll just make the demarcation there with the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, Mars conjunction in Capricorn, is the new age, right? We're in the new age now. It's like
Mhm.
it's like being a baby. The baby's born, we're through the birth canal, and the baby still has the north node, south node, right? Like we're trying to understand these past karmic patterns, these past karmic values and virtues that we believed, right, were giving us some sort of significant truth, but are really just being revealed to us now as being not only barren and empty, but meaningless and holding us back in terms of what we really want.
Mm-hmm.
That's this here. Mars, Moon, Venus, conjunct South Node. There has to be a transformation and transmutation of those values occurring by way of a transpersonal transformation here. This Saturn, Uranus square, squaring the nodes, squaring this eclipse. This is huge. I mean, honestly, this eclipse portal here is fantastic. There's nothing, I haven't seen anything like this in a while, and it's nice, right? In terms of eclipses, I'm born with a huge Scorpio eclipse, right? So I'm all about this, but this is not the kind of stuff where it's like I'm waking up and like, oh yeah, I'm just doing what I did yesterday, and like, oh, I'm gonna do what I did tomorrow. This is like, there's a great quote by Rilke, and this poem also came up for me, The Torso of Apollo by Rilke, this poet. And I will just read it really quickly because I think it is really resonant for this eclipse, and especially since we're talking about here the archetype of Apollo in relation to Python. We cannot know his legendary head with eyes like ripening fruit, yet his torso is still suffused with brilliance from inside, like a lamp in which his gaze, now turned low, gleams in all its power. Otherwise, the curved breast could not dazzle you so, nor could a smile run through the placid hips and thighs to that dark center where procreation flared. Otherwise, this stone would seem defaced beneath the translucent cascade of the shoulders, and would not glisten like a wild beast's fur, would not, from all the borders of itself, burst like a star. From here, there is no place that does not see you. You must change your life. And for me, this really sums up what's going on here. So I'm just going to show a couple of things, right? The dark center where procreation flared, from all borders of itself burst like a star. This allusion, again, right, to the sacral and root chakras. I'm trying to think of the name of the yes, there was a secret society. Yes, there was a secret society that was attempted actually during the period where Pluto was formed by a philosopher named Georges Bataille. Again, headless, literally headless. This image here, right, was crafted by one of the artists involved. There's this kind of intestinal spiral, or this, again, right there, if you think about the spiral.
Oh yeah, don't get me started on the spiral. That's a rabbit hole.
Right. And this is a really important thing here, because I think what we're talking about, what this represents here, is the emergence of creation from the very center, or the very central, or the very abyss of nothingness, right? And there's this allusion here to the gateway, and you have the, again, the skull, right, or Scorpio ruling the genitals or the root chakra. This, it's almost like man is emerging from this primordial
soup.
Yeah, this primordial soup by way of the belly button, right, or by way of the umbilical cord, right? And so obviously, right, if you're not reading this properly, people could start to quickly say, and what I think we're seeing in society right now is a huge like hatred of women, right? Obviously, right, that's occurring right now in our society. But what we're not recognizing is that is a very mistaken understanding of the kind of primal femininity that we're talking about here, the primordial femininity, this aspect of the great mother, right? Lilith, Isis, Mary, Sophia, Kali, the witches. There's all of these different archetypal values and virtues of the great mother.
Oh my God, that's in the shape of a heptagram. If you scroll back up a little bit, that hits all points.
There it is. There you go.
Wow.
So this is from Eric Newman's book. I don't know. Yeah, I guess the Great Mother. That's just what it's called. But he's another great Jungian psychologist. And what we're talking about here, if you want to reduce all of these archetypes to their center, to their source, the chaos of primordial creation. She is referred to as a woman, right? That's if we're getting to the furthest possible definition of femininity, it is the womb or the essence of primordial creation through and from which all things emerge, right? Even the archetype of Apollo is ultimately a part of that, right? There's no solar consciousness without the birth of the sun, right? And the birth of the sun is occurring from essentially this chaos of primordial creation, or this fundamental abyss or void, whatever you want to call it. These all have ancient feminine associations. And so it's a fascinating time, because what people are grappling with is this, right? It's like going to the end of the earth on your journey of fucking murderous imperialism and realizing there's no great dragon there. It's like the great dragon that was inside of you all along.
Yeah, looking outside for answers when the answers are held within. It's almost like the very similar to that sweatshirt that I sent you a picture of of the lifeguard cross that says off duty, save yourself. Like, take that time. Do not expect people to save you right now. You have to save yourself. You have to step up to the plate. No one knows those demons or those dragons better than quote unquote you. You know what I mean? So
yeah. The Aries full moon with the the Aries full moon video that we did going into this one, it's all still there. It's like we have to face those dragons and those demons, right? We have to face those wounds and transmute them, right? Again, transmute them into the Chiron principle, right? Chiron, here you go. Here's your quincunx of the nodes, right? There has to be this change or this adjustment, and it has to happen pretty quickly, and it's happening during this eclipse with the Saturn, the quincunx, the adjustment. Yeah, the Aries Libra full moon, I think, is very relevant to this, right? I don't think we could just throw that away the moment this comes up, right? There's a reason why that kicked off this eclipse cycle here. There's nothing to turn to, right? There's the journey of the hero, right? If you're interested in the Joseph Campbell stuff, right? This journey that occurs around the world, it's the hero and the heroine, right? That's it's just no. I'm not a big fan of saying, oh, there's like the hero journey and the heroine journey. They're fundamentally different. I think that there's the journey of humanity, right? And I mean, the feminine and masculine are within all of us, and they're all principles which are relevant to all of us, and they need to be whole. They need to be together. They need to be balanced. And what that process is the integration, the coming together, the joining of those principles. And you can't,
I think that's something that's said in like the quote unquote hero's journey, is that at a certain point the hero has reached the end of his physical journey and now must journey within himself.
Right. And you know exactly what that is, the descent into hell, or the descent into the underground. It's the journey toward the feminine principle, right? If we're thinking about Python, right, Venus's journey into the underworld, anything that's occurring in Scorpio is the descent into the feminine principle. It's the descent into the abyss, or the descent into the void, and the encountering of Python, or the encountering of the Great Mother, or the encountering of Medusa, right? And it's not to say that any of these are positive or negative things. There's consciousness and then there's unconsciousness. And if we want to be whole, we have to become conscious of the unconsciousness, and vice versa, become conscious of the unconsciousness that resides in our consciousness. You know?
Yeah.
Like these are things that are crucial to becoming a whole human being, and ultimately to becoming one who sees and knows oneself, right? Like know thyself, right? One of the most fundamental Gnostic principles. If you had any two words to sum up the journey in life, it's those two.
Gnostic itsum.
Yeah, it doesn't get much realer than that. So like, I really love the Uranus on the North Node thing, right? We can't forget that this is still incredibly relevant as long as the Saturn's squaring this eclipse and the next one. What kind of thoughts do you have on the astrology? What have you been looking at or feeling out right now?
Well, just staring at everything going on in Scorpio, and that it's all at basically 2 degrees. It almost exactly conjunct. I think is, like you're saying, it's the primary energy that's rocking this. But I think with Uranus being there and having its aspects going to that, what we think is going to be, you know, the outcome or what might go down actually might not be what we're thinking that it is, because Uranus is chaos, right? It keeps you on your toes, and with it being conjunct the south node, like, I don't know if that's something being dug up from the past. I mean, I guess in its very literal transfer, example of something being dug up from the past that's unexpected, that's a surprise, that, a total plot twist, right? Or if it's just a matter of more people devolving into chaos from the current mind state that they're at, and how that might affect the collective as a whole, or how it might affect specifically feminine energy as a whole. But I do feel like over, I don't know, at least the last 5 years, I'd say, there has been a concentrated effort on the war on women, and the war
Yes,
on
yeah.
women energy. So we could be seeing some type of crescendo of that.
Here's your astrological archetypal metaphor.
Yeah.
Uranus and Taurus splintering the earth, right? An earthquake or even a lightning strike that splinters the earth, the tectonic plates of the earth shifting, the surface of the earth fissuring. What's
Mm-hmm.
beneath, right? What's beneath that? Scorpio, the
Hades.
Teutonic underworld, right? Basically
Mm-hmm.
what we're opening here, not in some sort of like hyper, like, I don't know, like moralistic Christian view, is like a portal to hell, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if we're talking about an eclipse in Taurus and Scorpio, particularly with an emphasis on Scorpio and a Uranus on the North Node, or Uranus and Taurus, we're opening a portal to hell by way of a sudden event, as you're talking about, right? Or something that's unpredictable, unexpected,
Mm-hmm.
psychically, materially, or whatever. I usually go by like the psychic or the soul. Something that's happening, right? There's an occurrence here, the shaking of the ground, which opens this portal to hell, where there is this process going on.
Right.
Um,
I guess one
and
question I kind of have is, like, I know that there's a descent happening, but could this unexpected event, this chaos that Uranus is bringing, be happening? This fissure, could that be happening to let something out?
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I don't necessarily, huh? So what do you mean by that?
Right. Right. It's just kind of crossed my mind, and I'm a little dumbfounded, and I'm still kind of marinating on it. But fissures happen for two reasons. Obviously, if we're going literally, it's a pressure release that needs to happen from the earth, whether that's gas, water, magma, whatever, right? But also, especially if you look at ancient texts, those fissures in caves were also built for something to come through. So
There you go.
are we ascending or descending?
I think that depends on the person, but I think for our purposes, the inner sanctum of Delphi centered around the cleft in the earth and navel, which emitted a gas from the remains of Python. The
Mm-hmm.
aroma put the Pythia into a trance, and it was believed this altered state inspired their prophecies. Right. So I think, right, if you think about, I was thinking about this too. It's like in Harry Potter, right, when they do the Chamber of Secrets thing. I'm probably gonna watch that tonight, honestly. Right. That's it. Like, if we're talking about, like, that's one of the great things about Harry Potter, right? People love Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, but because what they're talking about is these different kind of trials and aspects of the hero myth, or something like Hercules, right?
Yeah.
These were stories that inspired people and resonated with whole groups of people, not only in Greek society but in our modern society, because they captivate and they encapsulate and approximate these psychic and spiritual soul philosophical principles that are occurring on a metaphysical level within us, right? So like what they go down into, it's actually Ginny, right, who goes down into the Chamber of Secrets first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And becomes like effectively like possessed by Tom Riddle or something like that, right?
Yeah.
What And then they actually go down right into the belly of the school, or whatever, right, and slay the basilisk. Um, that's spot on for this
Yeah.
astrology. Um, right, and what happens right later on in the Harry Potter series is that one of the fangs of the basilisk, right, becomes useful in killing, or what is it, killing one of the Horcruxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's this idea here where in the journey of this going into the underworld and going to where the dragon is, and I would call this the center of the underworld, right? You have in the mythology, right? You go into the labyrinth, and the Minotaur is at the center of the labyrinth. Again, what the
Mm-hmm.
Minotaur represents is the animal unconsciousness in man. Again, as referenced by Jung, right? These are similar archetypes. The doing battle with the Minotaur, slaying the dragon. This is a archetypal kind of hero style myth where I think some people are going down into there for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this, especially in terms of the last video that we did. This is not the same for everyone, and it's not going to be. But
Mm-hmm.
what is going on here is people who are at different stages of this process. So you may have already gone down there and slew the metaphorical dragon. Maybe you have to go down there again to retrieve something which is helpful on the next quest, right? But
Right.
regardless, there's something going on down there that I think you're right, that something is emerging or something is coming out or something needs to be seen or obtained on our part, whether it's the first time going down there, or whether you've been on another quest and you're coming back into this realm of Scorpio with Venus's descent and the conjunction of the sun, right? The solar consciousness shining down into these depths. I think for me, it's been a realization of these values that I had that were old and stagnant, and things that I was blind to. Things that I was blind to at the depths and the core of my values or my virtues, or even who I thought people were, or what I thought the world was supposed to be, or what I was supposed to do, and
Mm-hmm.
letting that shatter and letting that fall apart. I think for me, that's what this has been. I'd be interested to hear what you've been experiencing.
It's interesting. It's kind of like I was saying when we talked after I got back from the ocean, that a lot of what I've been experiencing has been pure observation of other people going through this. And I don't know if that's just because I've somewhat been through this dark night process and because of how extended it was that I'm able to even pick up on those dynamics. But the closest that has come as far as directly affecting me is the pulling on my energy. Right.
Yeah.
So, like a energy vampire vortex, I think is what I called it.
That's I mean, if you want to talk about Scorpio as the snake, that's what it is. Energy vampirism, manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
enslavement, the use of other people's energy to accomplish your ends,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, just like I'll pull up my no. Right, if you want to look at the transits in relation to my chart, this is this is what it is.
Holy cow, dude.
Yeah, like all of this, like I mean, I think it's just like it's like okay, like this is an inevitable on my end. It's definitely hitting me like pretty hard, but in like a way that, right, this is something that's not necessarily new to me, this process of going into the underworld, right? And like really kind of hitting stone and facing the abyss, right? But I think it's just like this refinement, right? Every time I go down there, there's always something that's a little more that
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning or picking up on that's surprising, right? And I think that's this
Right.
Uranus element here where it's like there is this element of I think pretty intense surprise that's
Yeah.
coming with this.
Yeah, like and of course the popular culture, the scroll that I've been seeing, as I doom scroll,
Scroll.
looking
The
at that
ancient scroll,
slide.
the ancient scroll of TikTok.
What's that?
The ancient scroll of TikTok.
Oh no, no TikTok. No TikTok for me. Just, your basic like news channels, just seeing what like the headlines are. And I'm seeing these energies play out, like the manipulation, which is in full form right now, especially in the US because of the elections that are coming up in a
Oh
few.
yeah.
It's obnoxious. There's really not a way to get around it except for to completely cut all that stuff out. And then outside of that, like in popular culture, how like it's shown through some of the backlash for some of these celebrities, especially things that come out of their mouth without saying who it
Yeah.
is. Um
All of
that
them, you mean?
they haven't
Literally.
they're probably on a descent versus like something coming out, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And
Right. That's yeah.
Yeah.
It's what the eclipses can represent, right? Like it's like the fall of a king, right? The
Mm-hmm.
solar eclipse, the eclipse of a king, right? So that would definitely the idea of a descent of someone in power,
Mm-hmm.
right? And similarly, the ascent of the disempowered.
Right.
That would be a great way to talk about these, particularly with Taurus and Scorpio, because I
Mm-hmm.
think what Scorpio represents, right, is Scorpio and Pluto are about as close as it gets to the eclipse themselves. Kind of entranced quantum transformation of something at a spiritual or soul level that invites a descent or an ascent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the eclipse event also, right, is I think very accurately described by the archetype of Uranus, right? This kind of sudden switching on and off of the lights or a lightning strike, which again catalyzes a transformational process.
Right. It's interestingly enough, it's very similar to like the weather patterns of this year. It's like, so at least in Washington State, there's like a little bit of lead time into the next season. So, like, when you're going from spring to summer, the rain tends to taper off. It isn't just there and then not there. But in every single season that we've had this year, that's exactly what it's been. It's literally the flip of a switch, and now it actually looks and feels like fall. Like, we were at 70 fucking degrees last week here, which is
Yeah.
really abnormal, really, really abnormal for Western Washington. And now, we're at a solid 50. It's windy, it's raining, flip of a switch.
So I'm
Over
really
again.
glad you brought up the astrological ages thing because I think this is the message, right? The overall message, not only for now, but I think for this entire like paradigm, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that this process that occurred here, right? The slaying of the kind of Chthonic dragon or python, right, by the hero, the Apollo, is really the incarnation and establishment of solar consciousness as the ruling dominion on Earth, right? But in the process of doing, you could call that patriarchy or whatever, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
process of doing so, that solar consciousness actually has to grow and develop to the point of which it's in tune with that source of primordial chaos or the creation or the nature principle itself. I mean, going down there and slaying the dragon is not the same as incorporating the dragon actively into the principle of solar consciousness, which is again the unification of the masculine and the feminine, or the unification of the kind of Chthonic mother or the grounds of creation with the solar principle, which is the light of human consciousness or whatever you want to call it, right, as it's going through its process of evolution. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what we need to do, obviously, here, right? And I think this is a mythological call toward that. But we need, if we don't do that, what's at stake, right? It's not only like humanity or whatever, but like the health and well being of the earth itself. Because in the process of moving out of this animal unconsciousness, right, which arguably caused a great number of ills in and of itself, right? In the process of moving out of that animal unconsciousness, we've lost touch with the fundamental forces and factors which animate and operate not only the earth, but the cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
Losing touch with that is a perilous, perilous thing. And you got to come back into touch with it. And if I'm looking here, sun, self, Venus, values, virtues, relationships,
Mm-hmm.
moon, emotions, feelings, south node, our past karma, our past existence, the things that we kind of hold and have held within us, or the grounds of the earth even.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be some sort of union here.
Yeah. So I wonder if a better term, at least for those listening who, think of it in the terms of patriarchy versus matriarchy, is like plutocracy.
Plutocracy is a good one for this time period. I think if I was going to say, I would say the paradigm of nature worship and then the paradigm of human worship.
Okay.
Like, so I think the Pisces age, right, and the worship of Jesus Christ is a perfect example. There's this progression from the worship of nature to the worship of the gods to the worship, right, the gods divorced from the planetary aspects which are a part of nature, right,
Mm-hmm.
to God, right, it's as some sort of like, I don't know, anthropomorphized vision of some being XYZ or whatever,
Yeah.
to Jesus Christ, right? Like this increasing, like the pattern there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it is
These
going to
things
be
that become
interesting to see what emerges though from this, because I mean,
it's just chaos.
as a species, like we're I'm probably going to piss someone off saying this, but as a
Piss
species,
everyone off.
um, we kind of have sheep culture. There's a need to follow. We need a leader. We need someone to follow, someone to tell us where to go, someone to tell us what to do, which is where a lot of these more organized religions, if you will, why they were able to gain such a foothold.
You just
Does
pissed
that
me off.
no?
It's irredeemable. I ordered sushi and they gave me the wrong fucking sushi order. I swear to God, I'm gonna die.
Oh, I'm sorry, dude.
That's so fucked up. There's like edamame in here. This is fucked up. This is all fucked up. Chaos. That's what it's bringing. That's what the eclipse is bringing. It's chaos. I just opened it too, and it's totally fucked. It's fucked.
That's obnoxious. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, so it is, you know. But yeah, that's I see this as being chaos. I mean, for people who are not necessarily kind of initiated into the underworld of these affairs, I think these next couple of weeks are not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
It's really going to fucking suck for people who are just not in tune with this kind of going to the underworld and kind of confronting the great mother and the kind of primordial shadow of the animal unconscious. Because most people operate there, you know?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to go to the bar and get drunk and like find someone to like manipulate into a one night stand with me and then like never talk to them again and then do it again tomorrow.
As if that doesn't come back to haunt you.
Yeah, like I mean, if you have sex with someone, it's like you're exchanging energy with them, you know, like
100%. Yeah.
so. Like I mean, just do what you're gonna do, I guess, right? Like the world still turns, and like people are still in need of like basic resources. Like this to me is kind of like you kind of gotta like decide what the fuck you're doing out here. Like at least for me, I'm like okay, like revolutionary culture. Like what are we gonna do to like incarnate that Aquarian paradigm of like real human community and kind of global community, which involves the supporting of people, right? People who of all of these nations or whatever that we've created that really don't exist or serve anyone, you know, like we live as a global community. So I don't know. I mean, there's that
with just the human species, like feeling like they need need a leader. We must have a leader or we can't get this done. Like
yeah,
that's
the
where our
disempowerment.
kings come from. That whole like monarchy system even comes from is this entitlement of feeling like you're in a position to lead, but also because of the sheep culture of people feeling like they need someone to lead them, not realizing they'll lead you, but they may also lead you off of a cliff if you're not thinking for yourself. Like, save your fucking self. Save
There's your
yourself.
plutocracy. There's your plutocracy.
Yeah.
If you because I gotta call this sushi place. This is fucked. So do you have cards or how do you want to do it?
Yeah,
If you have anything else, let's
pull
do
the
it.
cards out. I will go ahead and shuffle those really quick. Let's see what pops up. All right, give me something for.
Pops up the wrong sushi delivery order. This is evil.
That's so lame. All right. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna pull a couple.
Okay. I'm gonna mute myself, so go off. I'm just gonna like.
Okay, apparently I'm not pulling a couple. So here's a really interesting thing about this is you remember that the card, the Eight of Swords, that had like the swords going through the TV? Interference.
Yeah, totally. Totally do.
Back. So we ended up with the Eight of Wands, the Death card, and then the Eight of Swords. So there's those eights again popping up. Wow.
I got Eight of Swords in my personal reading too that I did natal chart reading a couple of days ago. That's interesting.
Yeah. It makes me almost think that 8 is going to be prominent in some way, but I don't know. That might be a stretch. I know the U.S. election,
Eighth house Scorpio.
and then of course Scorpio, 8th house. Yeah, so I think that whatever's going to happen is going to happen quick. With the 8 of Wands being here, that represents swiftness. So it's usually information coming in really fast, how it's portrayed with the wands. And then, of course, with death, I would say that information that's coming out is leading to some type of mass transformation, but there might be interference in people's ability to make that transformation on an individual level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about the gist of it. Like, whew, that's interesting. That's really, really interesting. So yeah, I would say like keep an eye out for information coming out. Like, and I know sometimes, at least what they do with mass media, they'll put the biggest information or the biggest story out at the end of the week on a Friday, because they figure that no one will actually pay attention to it because it's the weekend. And when it's the weekend, people want to not deal with any of that. They want to go out to the bars. They want to fuck whoever they want. Like, priorities, right? People are not thinking about it in the news. But there's a very good chance that yesterday in some part of the world, some really critical information came out that's not really being looked at because of the time that it came out. And that's 100% intentional when higher authorities, if you will, quote unquote authorities, want to hide something. They don't want to revolt. So yeah, this is huge though. I do feel like this is pretty big. Like the death card coming up is in okay, so the death card in this particular deck is literally like a surgeon or a doctor of some sort. There's a person laying on the table, but you can only see their skeleton, but you see a version of their heart and the circulatory system around it. And it looks like the doctor is manipulating the heart like a magician. It's creepy as fuck.
That's totally Scorpio vibes. That's crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would say the spirit is kind of getting in there.
Yeah.
It's getting in there and doing a little something. It's doing a chiropractic adjustment with the Chiron.
Mm-hmm. Here, I wonder if I can snap a picture of this and actually upload it before we end the video. So that way I don't have to overlay it later.
Upload it here? Okay, do that. I'm going to make this call to the sushi place, and then we can shut the video down, and I'll talk to you on chat, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
I'll leave my stuff.
Okay, let me pull this up really fast. Yeah, these cards are trippy as fuck. So let me share my screen really quick. There we go. Okay, so all y'all can see, this is what I was talking about with the doctor, like magician energy, manipulation energy. So absolutely matching with the transits that we have right now. And this is an unusual visualization of the 8 of Wands. But in the traditional tarot deck, it's just all you see is 8 wands. You see a background of like a field or something, and those wands are coming in very quickly. And then again, of course, the interference card being the 8 of Swords. So in the traditional tarot, that is a character, and they're usually standing in a circle of swords, and they're blindfolded, but their hands are tied in front of them, and there's an opening between all these swords, and that's showing that this person has the ability to actually remove themselves from the area that they are stuck in. So I think that's about the gist of it. I'm going to go ahead and end this video. And yeah, so keep your wits about you this eclipse. It's going to be an interesting one.